Just a day after President Trump and Secretary of Defense Hegseth outlined the administration's stance on Ukraine, and mere hours after I provided my video analysis of it, another major shift has taken place in the administration with regard to Ukrainian foreign policy. And this is one that is leaving analysts struggle to discern a consistent approach here. For example, on Wednesday, Trump and Hegseth firmly stated there would be no U.S. troops on the ground in Ukraine. However, shortly after on Thursday, Vice President J.D. Vance said the U.S. would impose sanctions on Moscow and potentially take military action if Russian President Vladimir Putin refused a peace deal that ensured Ukraine's long-term independence. He even stated that the option of sending U.S. troops to Ukraine remained, quote, on the table, a far tougher stance than what Hegseth or Trump said just a day earlier. Vance elaborated that the U.S. has both economic and military leverage against Putin, but insisted that President Trump aims for a productive negotiation with both Putin and Zelensky. In an interview with the Wall Street Journal, just hours after Trump announced his intent to negotiate with the end of the war, Vance stated, quote, "I think there is a deal that is going to come out of this that's going to shock a lot of people," end quote. Now, the inconsistency reflects a broader uncertainty surrounding the administration's actual global posture here. While Trump speaks of negotiations rather than force, Vance suggests a tougher stance, emphasizing both economic and military leverage against Russia. But it wasn't just Ukraine policy that has created waves. Today, Vance, in his first major speech as vice president at the Munich Security Conference, diverted from the anticipated discussion on the war to launch into a scathing critique of European governance. His message here: the biggest threat to Europe wasn't Russia or China, it was the continent's own leadership. He said, quote, "The threat that I worry about most vis-a-vis Europe is not Russia, not China, it's not any other external actor. What I worry about is the threat from within, the retreat of Europe from some of its most fundamental values," end quote. Instead of reinforcing Trump's call for increased European defense spending and increased security, Vance accused European leaders of stifling free speech, mishandling immigration, and excluding right-wing populist parties from governance, which he argues are actions and symptoms of a democracy in retreat. Now, the speech, filled with historical parallels, took an unexpected turn when Vance compared today's European leaders to Cold War-era tyrants. Vance's rhetoric further distanced the administration from the European mainstream. Unlike previous U.S. leaders who condemned Russia's and Belarus's sham elections, Vance visibly avoided criticizing those regimes. Instead, he mocked the notion that foreign disinformation campaigns could destabilize a strong democracy, saying, quote, "If your democracy can be destroyed with a few $100,000 of digital advertising from a foreign country, then it wasn't very strong to begin with," end quote. Meanwhile, Trump continued to chart his own course. He stated that Russia should be reinstated in the G7 and reaffirmed that Ukraine's NATO membership was off the table. This left analysts wondering whether Vance's earlier hardline stance was part of a broader negotiation strategy or simply a sign of internal disarray within the administration. As the Munich Security Conference progressed, Vance shifted focus to European migration policies, stating, quote, "No voter on this continent went to the ballot box to open the floodgates to millions of unvetted immigrants," end quote. And this aligns with the rhetoric of Europe's rising nationalist movements. With these diverging messages, foreign policy experts still remain puzzled. Is the administration engaging in strategic ambiguity, keeping adversaries and allies off balance? Or is there a genuine communication breakdown here at the highest levels of the government? One thing remains clear: the world is watching here, and U.S. policy continues to shift, leaving allies, adversaries, and analysts uncertain what's going to come next.